All right, today I want to start in on Unit 5. This is a busy unit. It's got all kinds of stuff in it, as you saw in the email that I sent out this morning. First, we're going to start out talking about just if statements and decision constructs in general. Loops, that I think is going to go relatively quickly. That will also incorporate arrays. We'll do a little bit of string processing just to get practiced up at that. And then we're going to take a look at PHP side, server-side validation. How to do validation? Well, that's if statements, maybe a loop, but mostly if statements. But the challenge is, okay, the server finds an error. I now need to communicate that to the human, to the client side. And so how do I do that? So that's where the challenge of this comes in, and how do I get the client to say, hey, I already validated it. You don't have to do it PHP side. The only reason I do PHP side validation or server side validation is if the JavaScript's not on. So what we need is some signal from the client to the server saying JavaScript wasn't on, you got to take care of this. So we still need validation on both sides if that's what we want to do. When we talk about the Lions Camp project, that to me was kind of a second level out of scope. No validation on the client side, or on the server side. We do all our validation on the client side. We're going to assume the JavaScript is on. The only risk we have is when people are online that aren't part of Lions Camp. They may not have their JavaScript turned on, then they don't get validation. Then what happens? And we try to stuff things into the database, and there's a risk there. So maybe on that side we'll add it. But for the Lions Camp primary users, they said JavaScript's on, we're using Chrome, not a problem. So in the interest of time, we'll probably leave that validation out or throw it back in later. So that's where we're going. Let's start in with the decision control structures. Real quick, what I have here is a quick application. There are actually two in this unit. This is the first one, just a big old long sample string with Mary in different capitalizations. We're going to mangle that string up a little bit, do some array processing on it so that you can get comfortable with arrays. And then when we process it, it counts how many times each word shows up and those kind of things. So that's my plan. This is what I've been modifying to make it a little more modern, let's put it that way, 2015, with the appropriate tags like headers and footers instead of sections. So that's what I was updating. I think it's fairly current. I'll give it one more look after class and make sure. Decisions in PHP, not a whole lot different than other curly bracket languages. We need parentheses around a condition. If there's only one statement, semicolon. If there's more than one statement, then we need curly brackets. Nothing too exciting there. The only thing that's a little different is not equal to. Shows up twice. You can use either one of these operators for not equal to. And the other thing that we've already talked about with our comparisons is the triple equal to, which basically says these two are not only the same value, but they're the same type. These two are not either not the same value or not the same type. They're not equivalent. We use this in our controller, and I'm also having a little trouble with my XAMPP working on my Mac, so I got to go back to old school here with Notepad++. For some reason, my flash drive doesn't have brackets and stuff, so, you know. Anyways, we went in here and we said, does the action variable start with control? Used a triple equal sign because if control is not there, action returns false. Unlike some languages, this string pos does not return a -1. It returns false if it doesn't find what you're looking for. False and 0 are the same value. We do a double equal sign on that. It'll match whenever it's not there, which is the last thing we want. What we really want to say is this variable, or this value, pardon me, in position 0? And it has to be in position 0, not missing. So we used a triple equal sign to make that happen. My mentor at Madison Area Technical College feels you should be using triple equal signs, not double equal sign, just about all the time. I don't know if I'd go that far.
Is that pretty much, is that only in JavaScript and?
No, it'll work in a lot of the other languages as well. Make sure they're the same type. But really the only languages where it makes a lot of difference are the languages that are typeless, like JavaScript, like PHP. In the other languages, if you try to compare a Boolean to an integer like C#, it won't work. In VB, it'll do the best it can. There, it's not even an option, but because these languages are typeless, so the variables can be different types, we have an option of saying not only are they the same value, but they're the same type. Logical operators, not, and, or, tertiary or conditional, inline if, parentheses around the condition. That's optional, because here I have an is set with no parentheses around the condition. And it seems to be working. Okay. So that piece, the parentheses, if you put them around there, it's not going to hurt anything. Question mark, what do you do if it's true? Question, or colon, what do you do if it's false? So that we already saw here. If this variable is set, question mark, whoa. Let's see if that causes trouble. That was excess. If you're following along, your action statement in the index file has an extra equal sign. Because what I'm saying here is if this is set, then use the request action as the contents of the action variable. Otherwise, use the standard control input, which is my default. So let me save that and make sure that all still functions properly. Looks like it. So the parentheses around that conditional operator aren't required. Switch statements. Pardon me. Oh, one other thing before I get into switch statements is it is possible, if we're using minimal PHP, to actually embed HTML inside of an if statement. Now, when I first saw this, it was a little bizarre. But since then, if I have a whole lot of here's HTML that I got to do if this is true, otherwise a completely different set of HTML if it's false, I can write a simple if statement inside of a PHP tag and end it with a colon. A little later in my notes it says you could also use a curly bracket, which you and I are pretty used to. Okay. So the PHP if statement ends here, but because there's a colon or a curly bracket, it knows to expect either an else or an end if. And here's the PHP for the else. Again, you could use a curly bracket. You wouldn't put one at the beginning, though. A little different than curly brackets. You can use either, wherever there's a colon, you can use a curly bracket, but you don't put curly brackets in front of the else. Pretty sure. Note the colon. And then at the end, and notice this is all just HTML, excuse me. And then at the end, you need an end if with a semicolon. That's one way to do it. If you've got a lot of HTML, and again, if you're trying to split the work up here, so that the logic of the page is done by a PHP programmer, but the layout of the page is done by some raw HTML person. This technique allows you to do that. What do you want to see? How do you want the page to look? What? Without any PHP. We're down here, we've got echo commands. This does exactly the same thing. It echoes the HTML instead of having the raw HTML inside.
Oh, that's because it's all in one statement.
This here?
Yeah, because you have brackets on the other side of your else.
I do, but this is just a regular PHP statement versus the split. Here's some PHP, and then in a later tag, you'll find the else, or you'll find the end if. So these have curly brackets because it's just a regular old if in this case. And the HTML is being generated by the echo statement. Both of these techniques work. This one uses what Murak would call minimal PHP. This uses PHP to generate HTML.
That's way more.
Noted. But you're also not used to that. And if you indent this and there's a few extra lines in between here, like 5 or 6, it's just as readable.
I can say if you have a lot of HTML without these.
Right. Then this makes sense. Okay. Particularly if the HTML is significantly different. But if it's not, this is just as valuable.
Could you just use that for like an include?
You could. And just include certain HTML. But then that would be PHP, right? Because the include command, you could say if some condition include. And it would include the HTML. That's another way to do it.
Because if
And
you're-
have that
if it's
HTML
gonna be-
as a partial view instead of a full view.
Right, it's gonna be a lot of HTML, you probably should have it in a view anyways.
Yep. Well, if I was doing this with HTML, this is a view.
Yeah.
Because that's the only place that HTML shows up anymore, right? Is in a view. So this is definitely a view because I'm generating HTML. Generating HTML is just two different ways of doing it. And yes, you can. I do it in my syllabi and my home pages. You can import HTML into an if statement. It's very effective, especially if you have boilerplate text like here's the mid-state special needs policy. When they change it, I change one copy, all of my syllabi change. PHP dates, you can compare them using just a standard less than and equal to. Somebody has overridden those operators for the class. So you can say if this date is less than that date, and most of the time it'll tell you, get you the answer that you want. But remember, that's not legal in JavaScript. In JavaScript, we had to convert everything to ISO strings so that we could compare them. PHP, when we do our validation, we can make it a little easier, as long as they're both dates. We have to create the date classes first before we can do some of that kind of stuff. But once we've created the date class, then we can compare them simply. Switch statements look pretty much like what you're used to. A switch statement with some control variable, curly brackets. Breaks are optional, but most of the time they're there. Default for the else.
If the break is optional, if it is not there, does it fall through?
It falls through. Switch or Swift is the only language that I know of where the breaks, or C# there, I think they're required now too, where these are still required. It is so uncommon and it is so difficult to understand. Not having a break here that they just make them mandatory. Was Swift the one that got rid of the break altogether? Yeah,
They're
it's gone.
Yeah.
It's gone. So it's C#, I'm sorry, that requires the break. Too many languages running around in my head. Swift doesn't require them at all unless you want to do nothing in that case, like with the default, then we had to put the break in, but that's a different class. So that's pretty normal, but yes, if the break is missing, it will fall through. So you want to make sure you don't miss the break unless that's your logic, but that's pretty rare. You can split a switch statement up as well. You do a PHP with a case. Then it's HTML. This I've never used. That's definitely confusing because you have to include the PHP and the break and all that stuff. And the only thing that's in between here is that. And again, if it was me and I had a lot of it, I probably have little mini include files to suck in and say, bring this in. Bring in different versions. Questions about those? Okay, then before we do loops, let's talk about arrays because usually those are what the for loop examples are all about, just processing arrays. So let's talk about how those are done. Can initialize an array in one of two versions, either by array parentheses. That defines an array. Arrays in PHP are similar to JavaScript where they're not fixed size. You can keep adding and subtracting and throwing stuff in if you want to. There is some weird stuff that goes on here as we'll see when we unset the element of an array. But you can continually add new elements. Arrays in this language are not fixed size like they are in some of the classic languages. So here's two different ways to define them. This is new as of PHP 5.4. I think right now we're using 5.6. I'm afraid to ask my version which one it is because it's off my flash drive that I haven't been updating. I'm just using it for emergency purposes today. So I'm not quite sure which version I have, but it's probably well past 5. So this is probably the easiest way to instantiate an array. And then once you've created the array, then the array name, $, is indexed like any other. This says add Volcker to position 0 if it's not there already. Single quotes, double quotes, doesn't matter. Still a string attached to that array.
Is array a class though?
I believe I'm going to say no. Because I'm looking here for any commands that I have that use !arrow, which would make it a class. So when I say instantiate an array, no, none of these. No, notice we all Sort, sort, sort. I don't see anything here that says it's a class. These all look like it's something other than a class. So when we use arrays, we don't do anything class-like. So I said the word instantiate. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Create an array. Add an element to it. If you want to quickly add one to the end, just give the array name, square brackets still required, with a string. You can remove elements. This is pretty rare. Pull that one out, but it doesn't remove it, move everybody else up. It simply sets this one to null. There is a command that you can use called array values that says give me all the ones that are not null from here and put them right back into array. If you're looking at indexes, those index them, but again, I don't do a whole lot of array processing where I have to pull stuff out of an array. If you need to, here's a reference. Should be pretty rare.
Do you have multi-type arrays?
Multi-types?
Or yeah, it's typeless, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's typeless. Yeah, it doesn't matter. So you could have an integer in the first array element and the second one be something else, yes. In associative arrays, that happens a whole lot more. So here's an associative array. Remember, all of the super global arrays that we've seen get cookie request, the one we've been doing most of our work with. Those are all associative arrays. They're key value pairs. Go ahead.
Does PHP leave them as arrays, or does it convert them to objects like JavaScript?
No clue.
Does it?
Just
Okay. So here I'm saying give me an element. This creates an array, and we could have done the same thing with the square brackets. Remember, this is kind of old school. And then we say create an element called age that's equal to 35. Now, I don't know if this applies to John's question. My bottom line, my gut feel is no, it's an array. Because in addition to this element that's indexed by the key, what PHP does behind the scenes, careful, Volker. I think this, I'm got ahead of myself here. This is SQL. It's bizarre when you go to SQL and say run a query and give me the records. They come back as an associative array. Actually, it's an array of associative arrays because when you get one record, it's field value, field value, field value. And then you have another record that is indexed. But those fields also have numeric indexes, which just boggles my mind. So there would be age, and then there would be element 0, and they're both set to 35. I think it's a convenience thing so that you could go through each of the fields by number. But most of the time we'll put that away. So let's leave that for now. I don't think it's going to show up here. So this is how we do it. We can also initialize an array very quickly. This is the 5.4 version. And say the key value of Wisconsin correlates to that. And so this is not class syntax, right? This is just a very quick way of initializing an array with key value pairs. Separated by commas. This one uses parentheses, this one uses square brackets. Either one works.
What's the difference between that and a dictionary?
Nothing.
Okay.
Except there's no types, so there's no such thing as a dictionary. Right. But this is called an associative array because the keys can be any type and they typically are text to look them up, but they don't have to be. Again, as I said before, most of the super global arrays are all key value pairs. The keys are all text, they're field names. And the values are whatever they are coming out of the database. It's a bunch of functions. Am I supposed to be doing stuff over here? Doesn't look like it yet. No. So here's a bunch of functions that we can use to process arrays. If we want to know how many elements are in the array, we use the count function. Notice it says functions, which goes back to your question about are these arrays or are they classes really? You can have arrays of arrays, but we cannot simply say array name.length. We could, it would be an object. So if we want to know how many items are in the array, use the count function. We've already seen this. Is this a key? Does it exist in the array? That's what we did to find out if there's an action up here. Same question. Is set checks two things. First of all, does the array exist? And second, does that key exist? If the key exists, we assume it has a value. So our question there is, does it exist? This is very important for us when we're starting to process checkboxes. So remember, checkboxes don't send anything to the server if they're unchecked. So the way we find out is if they're checked, or if the data is there, is to see if the array element exists. If it does, then the checkbox was checked. We can add up all the numbers in an array very quickly. That's nice. This is the index of function. Okay. Find this in there. This is looking at the values. Does the key exist? So that's very similar to isSetKey. Does this key exist in that array? But notice in this case you provide both, and here you flip it around the other way. They both kind of give you the same answer. Does that key exist? Either true or false. Array search, so we can search an array for a value. A little different. I think this one also returns a key. Sorry, yes. Array search. So all of these are, I probably pulled them off the web. So if you want details, look them up there. We can sort. We can reverse sort. We can asort, which is for associative sort. Keeps the keys and their values together. And this sorts the values versus AR sorts reversed. Key sort sorts the keys. So if for some reason you want all your variables in alphabetical order, you could do that. And sort the keys in reverse. So this think associative array sorts the associative array by value and keeps the keys connected. You can also shuffle if you want to randomly order your array. That could be handy if you've got an array of cards. Find the key, get a random key. Holy cow. So this goes into the array, grabs one of the keys at random. Interesting. And today we'll make a little bit of use of this. This explodes a string, turns it into an array. So if we have a big long string with some kind of a separator in it, we're going to separate them and create elements. And there's also an array split, which is similar to what the other languages talk. The term the other languages use. So instead of explode, we could string split. I'm sure the syntax is slightly different. And then implode does the opposite, takes the array and turns it into a single string. We've already seen print R, we've seen extract. Those are special functions that deal with key value pair arrays. This makes variables, this just prints them all out. That was pretty quick, but that's the overview of arrays. Let's keep plugging along. As I mentioned, we can do multi-dimensional arrays. Multi-dimensional arrays are just arrays of arrays. So you say this array element, square brackets, equals another set of square brackets. And then you can start pulling stuff out by using square bracket 0, or I think it's square bracket 0, and another set of square bracket 6 would get the 7th element of the first element. If that makes any sense. Okay, so here's my instructions. Create a function called create word list to build the word list array. Might be a good time for a break to me to remember what the heck that means. I think that means I want to go through. Remember, this has got a full list of words here. And I want to generate an array using all the distinct words that are in there. Pretty sure that's what I want to do. Okay. So we want to create a function. So I'm going to now switch gears and look to see if I can find there it is. My model already has a control mex cases and a control mex model file. So in here I want to create a function called create word list. Okay. Function. create word list. I'm not going to send it anything. No, because this is where it's in my request array. So I can just grab it from the request array. That would be nice to know what that thing is called. So I think the first thing I'm going to do in here, just for test purposes, is do a print R of the request array. But I also need to call this. So from my cases file now, if I'm going to the results, I need to include my results page. But before I include the results page, I also want to call that function, which was create the word list. So I just want to see, I want to make sure that I want to find out, first of all, what that field is called. Yes, I could go into the view and find out, but this is also a good way of verifying that my request array has made it. And so I'm going back in here. I need to refresh this page and then test my form. And the action is control results, and that object is called sentence, and it has the exact contents of my text box. So what I want to know here is the sentence. So in this method, I just want to split that all up. This is good now. I verified it. I want to split it. So I'm going to create an array called words that is equal to the exploding of the array, which is the request sentence element. Couldn't I just extract that? Could. There's only one, so I'm not going to mess with it. And I'm going to explode it on every space. Notice I do have some commas in there, but if I want to get all the words, I have to get the spaces on. And now, since that's an array, I can do a print R, shouldn't have deleted it, of the words. I'm also going to echo the pre-tags just so that pretty them up a little bit. I'm going to have to bring my function in one of these days. Remember, I have a utility function that adds those two pre-tags around the print R command. I just call it print R, my print array. So let's see if that works. Since the only thing I've changed is this function, the only thing I should be able to just refresh this page and resend the data. And I got nothing, so that didn't work very well.
Yeah, I got that.
Here's separators first. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I would say explode this based on that instead of based on this, explode that. But see, that makes a difference. There we go. So now I have an array. Notice this is not an associative array, but this is an array of the words that were inside the original string.
Can you explode up multiple?
Pardon me?
Is there any way to explode up multiple things?
Multiple fields?
Like, say I want
Yes,
to
I'm sorry, this string could be anything, but I don't have a consistent, in my string, I don't have a consistent,
separator, right?
Right.
So I was wondering if you could do, say, use all of these separators
Good question.
Comma, et cetera.
Yeah, like space and period and
I think you'd have to write one function. It's not-
Delimiter, string, limit. So it doesn't look like with this one we can do that.
No, because if you put.
Returns an array of strings. If the delimiter is the empty string, explode will return false. The delimiter contains that is not in the string. Negative limits. List, explode on a colon. Explode on a comma.
you can use MD split, and that splits a multi-byte string using a regular expression.
Yuck.
Mhm.
Detracts from some of the stuff I want to do. The other thing I want to see though is string split, see if it's any more powerful. I really don't want to do what you're asking me because I want to do more string manipulation to see if there's a comma, get rid of it, type of thing. But I understand your question. Is there a way I could split on either a space or a comma space? String split length, maximum length of the chunk. Wow. But notice now, this is the string. Converts a string to an array.
Well, it's only by length, it looks like.
Convert a string to array doesn't give us a whole lot of information. If the optional length is specified, the return array will be broken into chunks with each split into a different length. Otherwise, each chunk will be one character. Well, that's pretty useless. So yeah, that gives you strings in chunks. If you know the chunks are all the same size, that's handy, but not terribly.
Well, if you wanted to process a string into character level, that would be real handy because you can split it into
Into individual characters. Yep. Okay, so now I have that in my notes. What am I supposed to do next?
Before you continue, I did
Yep.
find one here that uses regex.
Right, that's what he was saying. If you do a search, you can do multiple versions of it, but again, detracts from some of my further
Yeah.
processing. So go for those if you need it. Okay, explode and send those back. Okay, so this stuff can go now, and maybe I'll even just cut it. And I want to return the words. Now that I've verified that it seems to work. If I'm going to return the words, I got to catch them on the other side. So back to my cases. Okay, here's where I created that word list, but I need to catch them. I don't have to use the same name, but I can. Words is now a global variable. This version of words is a global variable. The other one, because it's not inside a function, right? So that makes it global. This one is defined inside of a function, so it's local. I have the same name. It's okay because this function just splits stuff. Should we make this a little more generic? This kind of limits me, right? Can't use this anymore. So what I'm going to do is cut that one, which means I'm going to lose my pre-tag, but that's okay. And I'm going to have a parameter come in, and I'll call it string. And I'm just going to split the string on a space. Could I make it more generic and split on a different? That would be stupid. That's called explode. Okay. So this function isn't worth a lot, but it is saving me a little bit of code maybe later. Okay, now that means here when I call it, I have to send it, what do you want to split? And I put the request array in here. Gives me a little bit of flexibility, so I could use this to split some other string in the future on spaces. Sentence.
Could you
Remember when we talked about functions in Unit 5 or 4? I said, sometimes when you design functions, how you design them, optional parameters, with parameters, using global arrays, using global variables, all of that is kind of up to you and how you need them to work. In this case, I have two solutions. I know that this one's a little more flexible, but I'm getting awful darn close to the explode command. Couldn't I have just said explode on a space right here? Sure. But it's good to get practice with another function. Go ahead.
Nothing, I was just pretty much answering my question, design it how you want, but is it
Well, unless I tell you how.
right? Is it possible that back in your function to leave the request in there and just send it the action tag or send it where it said sentence, send that in as the variable?
If I had extracted it, yes, but I never extracted it.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And since there's only one field, I'm not extracting it. I could say extract request, and then I'd have sentence, and I could send that in. Again, it gives me that flexibility versus the old way where it simply just took the request array sentence variable. Pretty limited. This is a little more powerful, but not really. It just takes a string, splits it on a space, and doing that with explode would not be a whole lot harder. So now we have another function. Explode, return the words, call it in the case, print R to make sure it worked. We already did that. Remove the commas and periods. How would we do that?
Split.
Could do a what?
String split.
Strings.
Each character.
We could, or my advice would, let's just create another function here then called remove punctuation. Of course, I gotta know how to spell it. Is that right? Looks pretty good. All right. And I'm going to send it an array of words. When I'm done, I'm going to return the new array of words. But now in here, I need to walk through every one of the elements of the array. And I'm going to do a double string replace. Remember in my notes here, under strings, these are even arrays. How would I remove? Remove commas and periods. That's where the for loops kind of come in. Go through each one, see if it has a period. So now I'm going to have to go back. Let's see, John showed up, Patrick is here. Now I want to go back to my other notes where we did string processing. And that would have been here, and find out how to replace. Here's string processing, format numbers, some string processes. Here's a string replace. You can do a preg replace.
That's the use a regular expression.
Yep. Use a regular expression. So, okay, you guys want to help me out here? Let's do it. I want to walk through every one of the elements in the array. So what's a for each loop look like? That's the other notes. For each as this name. Okay, we're not doing key values, so this is the kind of array that we have because what we got was an indexed one. This says for each array, it returns each value from the array. So for each words as a word, $word equals whatever it was before with all the periods and commas replaced. So that's the preg replace. Preg replace is a string function. You use array to replace with a different string. Does it actually do it in place or does it return a new string? Guess we better go look, huh? PHP preg replace. Here's the pattern. Here's the replacement. And this is the array that we're messing with. It returns a mixed value by the looks of it. So there's the pattern. And this returns a string with it. So we do want to catch the results. So word is equal to preg underscore replace with a pattern first. And looking at this, the patterns start with a slash, or is that just, that's what they're looking for?
Looks like this.
It's like the start and end, it looks like.
No, because, no, I don't think so.
Is that option?
No, I think that slash and the one at the end say that's a regex.
There isn't one at the end, that's an I.
Oh, I mean right before the I.
No, that says do it case insensitive.
Yeah, I mean that forward slash and the one right before that forward slash. Are you asking if those are needed?
Yep.
Because I think they are.
Don't you have a Regex?
Yeah, I have a regex, but I can't guarantee you it's up to date for PHP. What do we want? We want any number of characters. It's a dot, or is it a question mark? Yeah, is that PH? Somebody go into my JavaScript notes now? I got too many notes all over the place here. Because in JavaScript, most of the PHP or the, I'm pretty sure the regular expressions are the same.
You can Google PHP Regex cheat sheet first link.
Where's the cheat sheet?
Just Google it. Google
Oh.
PHP Regex cheat sheet. First link.
Pattern, replacement, and then the array. So here's my pattern, just so I don't forget. Replace with nothing, right? So that's easy. And in Word. Okay. And then you said PHP Regex cheat sheet.
Ooh, you got a different one. Second link is what I use.
Oh, that's not helpful. I guess it would be. Quantifiers 0 or more. Should be plenty more than that. So, but I want 0 or more of any character. So notice here's the start of string, Neil. That wasn't. I don't think that. I think that backslash is an actual. Why do they have a parenthesis there? One or more, A or B. Looking for the group of characters, character classes, white space, digit, word, upper. See, these are old.
Yeah, in their forward slashes that are being used, and not backslashes, because those backslashes are for the escape, but
Okay.
there are forward slashes. I
Those
think
are forward slashes. White space, word. Maybe that's a different way to look at it. Is find a word. Find a word, followed by, oh, you sure you want to do this? Could be tough. Then no, chicken. 1, 0 or 1 characters. No. Any word followed by a selection of dot or comma, where the dot now needs a backslash so it doesn't get any special meaning. Or it probably doesn't need it because it's inside the brackets. So what does this say? This says, give me the word that precedes that. And then if we look at some of the examples here, we can actually catch what we found using $. Why is there curly brackets on that one, but not this one? This is the first one. This is the third pattern, then a 1. Pardon me?
Curly brackets means repeat, doesn't it?
Well, this is the replacement, though. That means replace it with whatever you found in the first position. And so this would probably be the second position. See here, we've got a word.
Plus means one or more.
One or more words, followed by a space, one or more digits, followed by a comma. So this is the first pattern, second pattern, third pattern. So this says, give me the first, this gives us the first of the month without any extra spaces. But it's curious because the dollar sign is there.
End of subject or multi-line code. That's what it says. For $sign.
Okay, so what I want to replace it with is not that, but just $1. I think. Because this is my first pattern, /\w, so that's a word. This is my second pattern, which is either a dot or a comma.
Don't you need a multiplier on the W though?
No, because we're already splitting on spaces. We're never going to have a double part word unless they've got hyphens in it or
I
something.
mean, I know, but I'm talking about isn't a W just stand for one letter?
No, it says-
No, W stands for word is what I saw.
Yep.
Word. Okay. So that's what I saw on that one. So let's find out. You guys said let's be brave. So here we go. Print R and better print. I lost all
Capital
that.
W is any non-word character.
Right.
I didn't know if that would be.
What's a non-word? That's numbers, white space.
No, numbers are included, but white space or symbols.
Okay. So I could use that here in case there's any other junk out there, but I know. But our example in this case is a little more specific. Only remove the decimal places and the commas.
What's the one for?
The one represents the first pattern. Okay, so if you look at the example that was on this page, it said, give me the first pattern that you found, but I need not a $sign, but curly brackets.
Are there patterns separated by parentheses?
I don't think so. They might be.
Because I'm just wondering what because the \W is in one set of parentheses.
Yeah, I don't know if they need those. We can, if this fails, that might be our next choice, is put parentheses around our two patterns. But there's pattern number 1, which is the W. Whatever word you found, give me that back, and nothing else. I think that's what that means. So let's find out. Echo our pre-tag. Followed by a print R of words, followed by another pre-tag. And my other concern is, can I change an element of an array when it's listed like this? I don't, that boy, oh boy, oh boy. I'm not sure this is going to work.
Do you have to stuff it back in?
Yes, you do have to stuff it back in, because what I'm getting here when I see this echo command says whatever this sends back, this is sending something back, and I see that in the pattern up here too, where it says something comes out, a mixed something comes out. Probably a string. So it looks like this returns a value, but that's another thing we could take a look at. Do we need to? Some languages don't. Some functions don't require that. This one seems to. Let's be brave. What do we get? Suppose I should call this function up.
Yeah, I'll grab that.
Couldn't I just use a global variable there instead of sending words all over the place? Yeah, I could. But again, I'm making this a little more flexible. Give me a list of words and I'll pull all the function, I'll pull all the parameter or punctuation out. Okay, preg replace delimiter must not be alphanumeric or backslash on line 11. That would be this line. So let's put parentheses around it, see if that shuts it up. That seems kind of redundant, but let's see if that helps anything.
That gives you your first pattern and your second pattern.
Unknown modifier parentheses. So maybe,
I think you need the forward
I
slashes.
think I need the forward slashes, but there's, you think you need both is what you're telling me?
Yes, because that's saying that's a regex right there.
I'm going to try it without the parentheses first. Okay, so now this one says start a regex. That one says end a regex.
That works.
Probably a good idea to put these in there first and then wrap the slashes around just so you get your head around the darn thing. So that works?
Yeah, I left parentheses on.
I left them in, but notice I still got commas.
It worked, but it didn't separate the stuff.
I think we got stuff back in.
I did.
I can get there.
Did you get commas back again?
Yes.
Okay, it worked, but it didn't. That's what you're telling me, right? And you have the parentheses in there yet. My first suspicion is I can't do a for each loop. I seem to remember in C# that a for each loop allows you to walk through, but you cannot change the elements of the array, the values of the array, because this copies what's in the array to a new value so that you can manipulate it. You manipulate the new value and immediately lose it. That's my next suspicion. So let's take a look going back to my notes
So you could either
and look
change
at a
the
regular for loop.
You could use a regular for loop, or instead of replacing, you could create a new array. I know, but
Okay, so let's do this then. Let's write our regular old for loop because that didn't work.
yeah.
I know. For index equals 0 as long as index is less than or equal to the count of words. I++. Less than the count of words, right? Count is 2 words. We want to go from 0 to 1. And then we need to go to words sub I is what we're filtering and put it right back into words sub I. Unexpected equal sign, expecting a what? Semicolon. Curly bracket equals semicolon. What line? 11. It's the for loop. Oops. How about we put $ signs in the variables? Come on, Brandon, you're not following along, so you gotta help me with these stupid mistakes. Not quite sure what that is. So this is not quite right. So maybe that does need that $ sign inside there, because everywhere it's stripped out the stuff.
Yeah, but also strip out the last letter.
For some reason.
Mine worked
But
with a different syntax for the regex.
because of the parentheses?
I have quote, backslash, parentheses, /W, close parenthesis, open parenthesis. So I have the parentheses around the W, yep, and then around.
I know where they are. Yep.
That works.
What is the point of those parentheses?
It designates where the conditions are, or where the different patterns. This is pattern matching 1. This is pattern matching 2. You said that worked for you.
Yeah, but my replace is different. You replace.
I have a replaced. Put it
I
down.
have a replace with just quote $1 quote. No parentheses.
Okay, so the curly brackets don't need to be there. The $1 is the first match, the value of, think of it as a parameter or a result. It is the value of the first pattern match. So the first pattern match that we asked for said, find me a word. That goes into $1. The second pattern is this one. That goes into $2. Right, and back in the example that was here.
So it's not like regex and JavaScript where you like have this and replace it with this type thing.
Well, no, I think this is available in JavaScript as well. It's just a little more advanced than we've done. Because notice this one, what it does. Okay? It says, give me the first thing that you matched, the first word, April. Okay, why it has a $sign around it, I'm not sure. Okay, give me the first thing that you matched. Curly brackets 1. What are we doing with this? Nothing. It's the second thing. And then the $3 is the third thing that I matched, but what I don't understand, this is $1, but then it's got a $1 in between. So this is stripping out all the spaces and giving me the first day of whatever month you specified as a string. Stripping out the spaces was a little goofy, but they could have found a way to do that as well.
You know what, those brackets, because it's case insensitive, those brackets might be keeping the case.
Maybe. Notice they're called back references. In other words, referencing back to the pattern that I found. Right, replace count.
I did curly brackets around the 1.
Yeah.
And it works.
It works with the curly brackets around the 1?
Yep, just the 1.
What did I have before? That's what I had, wasn't it?
You were missing the $sign.
So you still need the $sign.
You were missing the $sign.
Okay, but I don't need the $sign, which tells me these curly brackets mean something else because I did it without the $sign, and yes, it did work.
Did it?
Mm-hmm. I believe so. I got an end result, so I was happy. There's no commas, no periods. Capitalization is still funky. Looks okay.
So now when I do that, I get in when there is a period.
Mm-hmm.
If you place this entire string with a literal.
Got the parentheses on these? Okay, we must be slightly different. Okay. The next thing I want to know is, can I take that out? I think I can. Whenever something is inside the square brackets, pick one of these characters. You can't have a repeating character inside the square brackets. So that's probably redundant. Looks okay. So, remember when we were playing with regular expressions in JavaScript, it was a challenge. It was fun. Fun. Depends on your perspective, right? It's a whole new language all its own. And then getting it to do something complicated like replace any comma or a period with nothing. The easy answer to this might have been, I think we did it. Didn't we do it in JavaScript? Replace any periods and slashes with, or periods and dashes with slashes. We say, I don't care where it is, replace it. Where are these commas and periods going to be at the end? So we could say, I don't care where it is, replace it. But we know it's at the end, so we could just put a bunch of any characters here. That was another option. Except the any characters in PHP is not quite as simple as it is in the other languages, unless it's missing in there someplace. Was that in this one? 0 or more of anything, 0 or 1, special characters, groups.
What about on the left-hand side? Character classes.
Yeah.
Backslash, replace. So you do any characters.
Control character. Where's my any character though?
I was going to say not word.
That's an option. But what I'm looking for is, if I remember right, wasn't there in JavaScript
Yeah,
any character?
that was a period, I thought.
No, I think it might have been, yeah.
Or a period meant any characters any number of times.
Period is any character except new line.
So there it is. It's still there.
Okay.
So we could have done this. Whoa. Still works. I did save it, right? Yep. So that's now any character. That's what I was looking for. The word worked because we happen to have words, but now this is any character, as he said, except new line. So this will give me anything followed by a period and a comma, or a comma, because they're in square brackets. If we leave those parentheses off, I'm guessing it's going to cause me some trouble. But let's find out.
I think that's how it determines expression 1 and 2. No?
Oh, yep, every time it took it off, it took an extra character. Lamb, lamb, lamb.
Because
Snow.
W represents just that one character.
Pardon me?
The backslash W represents just that one character.
\W.
Or the backslash, I mean the period, sorry.
So the parentheses gave us our pattern matches.
Oh, because what it was replacing was it was taking the first pattern, it was taking multiple patterns. And
Yes,
the nth pattern, which would be the last letter of the word, was what we wanted to replace it, not the first one, which was everything before it. Yeah, so it's doing weird things.
yeah, I would put the parentheses in so that you get the match. In this case, I took the second set out because I don't really care what it is. I just want the first set. I'm not using the two, so I took the other parentheses out. But parentheses don't hurt anything. So that took care of that. Tomorrow's job is to actually count the unique words in there and get a word count that Mary showed up 3 times or whatever it is, and hopefully make it case insensitive, and we'll do both. First we'll make it case sensitive and then case insensitive, so a little more array processing. We're going to search through the array and not really search so much as walk through it and say if this element's already in the other array as a key, then ignore it. So that's what we'll do tomorrow, and then we'll move on into the validation part, or tomorrow, Wednesday.